Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he carried another tray of exotic dishes across the gleaming floor of Stellar Heights. The restaurant floated in the heart of New Geneva Station, surrounded by the endless stars of the Andromeda sector. Through the massive windows, he could see ships from dozens of different worlds docking and departing every few minutes. The restaurant was beautiful in a cold, perfect way. Everything was made of smooth metal and crystal that caught the light from 3 different suns. The tables were arranged in careful patterns, each one costing more than Jake made in a month. Alien flowers that glowed soft blue and purple sat in expensive vases, filling the air with sweet smells that made his nose tingle. Jake had been working here for 8 months now, and he still felt out of place. The other servers moved with practiced grace, their uniforms always perfect, their smiles never fading. Most of them were human like him, but they had learned to keep their heads down and their mouths shut. That was how humans survived in places like this. At table 7, a group of Zelkans were discussing trade routes over their meal. The Zelkans looked like tall, thin people with silver skin and 3 eyes. They spoke in musical tones that sounded pretty but carried no warmth when they looked at Jake. One of them snapped his fingers to get Jake's attention. "More wine, human," the Zelkan said without looking up from his plate, "and be quick about it. We have important business to discuss." Jake nodded and hurried to the wine storage. He had learned not to talk back. The first week he worked here, he had tried to make friendly conversation with customers. That had earned him a harsh lecture from Kekstar, his supervisor. Kekstar was a Vorthan, a species that looked like large lizards with smooth, green skin and yellow eyes that never seemed to blink. "Humans are here to serve," Kekstar had told him that day. "You are not here to chat or make friends. You bring food, you clean tables, you stay quiet. The customers do not want to hear your thoughts." Jake had wanted to argue, but he needed this job. His family back on Earth was counting on the money he sent home every month. His little sister was starting college next year, and his parents were getting older. Working at Stellar Heights paid 3 times what he could make anywhere else on the station, even if it meant swallowing his pride every single day. He returned to table 7 with the wine, pouring it carefully into their crystal glasses. The Zelkrons continued their conversation as if he was invisible. They talked about shipping routes and profit margins, about which human colonies were producing the best resources. They spoke about humans the way someone might talk about farm animals. "The mining operation on Kepler 442b is exceeding expectations," one of them said. "The humans there work very hard for very little pay. Much better than using our own people for such dirty work." Another Zelkran laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. "Humans are perfect for dangerous jobs. If something goes wrong, we have not lost anyone important." Jake's hand tightened on the wine bottle, but he kept his face blank. He finished pouring and stepped back, waiting to see if they needed anything else. They waved him away without a word. The evening continued like this, table after table. At table 3, a wealthy Mordian family complained that their human server had been too slow. Mordians were short and stocky, with thick gray skin and no hair. They wore expensive robes covered in jewels that probably cost more than Jake's entire apartment. "These humans have no sense of proper service," the father said loudly. "Back on Mordara, our servants know how to move quickly. These Earth humans are lazy." His wife nodded, her multiple chins wobbling. "We should speak to management. Perhaps they need better training, or better humans." Jake delivered their dessert without comment, but inside he was burning. He had been working for 6 hours straight, without a break. His feet hurt, his back ached, and he was tired of being treated like he was worth nothing. At table 12, a group of Vorthans were celebrating some kind of business deal. They had ordered the most expensive items on the menu and were drinking wine that cost more per bottle than Jake made in a week. Their leader, a large Vorthan with golden scales instead of the usual green, raised his glass in a toast. "To the new Geneva expansion project," he announced. "Soon we will control 3 more sectors, and the humans will have even more work to do for us." The other Vorthans laughed and clinked their glasses together. One of them noticed Jake standing nearby and grinned, showing rows of sharp teeth. "What do you think, human?" the Vorthan asked. "Are you excited to serve us in even more places?" Jake forced a smile. "I am honored to work here, sir." "Good answer," the Vorthan said. "You humans are learning your place in the galaxy. Much better than when you first arrived, thinking you were equals." Jake's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. When humans had first made contact with galactic civilization 5 years ago, there had been hope that they would be welcomed as partners. Instead, they had quickly learned that older species saw them as newcomers who needed to prove themselves. The only jobs available to humans were in service, labor, or dangerous work that other species did not want to do. The restaurant's main dining room held about 50 tables, and nearly all of them were filled with alien customers. Here and there, Jake could see a few humans dining, but they sat quietly and spoke in whispers. They were usually traders or company representatives, people who had managed to scrape together enough money to eat here, but who knew they were only tolerated. As Jake cleared another table, he caught sight of his reflection in one of the polished walls. He looked tired and older than his 24 years. When he had first taken this job, he had told himself it was temporary. He would work hard, save money, and eventually find something better. But 8 months later, he was still here, still carrying trays and taking insults from customers who saw him as less than equal. Kekstar appeared beside him, moving with the silent grace that all Vorthans seemed to have. His yellow eyes looked Jake up and down, checking for any sign of poor performance. "Table 15 needs their order taken," Kekstar said. "And remember, human, you represent this establishment. Act accordingly." Jake nodded and straightened his uniform. Another table, another group of customers who would look through him like he was not really there. He picked up his order pad and walked toward table 15, wondering how much longer he could keep doing this before something inside him finally broke. The evening rush was at its peak when Jake noticed the man walk into Stellar Heights. Unlike the usual customers who entered with loud voices and expensive clothes, this human moved quietly through the entrance. He wore simple black pants and a plain dark shirt that looked clean but nothing special. His hair was dark and a little messy, and he had a short beard that made him look tired. Jake was refilling water glasses at the Mortian table when he saw the man stop near the hostess station. The hostess was a tall Zelkran named Vera who had silver skin that sparkled under the lights. She looked down at the human with obvious annoyance. "Do you have a reservation?" Vera asked in a cold voice. The man shook his head. "No, I was hoping you might have a table available." Vera looked him up and down, taking in his simple clothes and quiet manner. "This is Stellar Heights, not a casual dining establishment. Our tables are reserved weeks in advance by important clients." The man nodded calmly. "I understand. I can wait if something becomes available, or come back another time." Something about his voice caught Jake's attention. The man spoke softly, but clearly, without the nervous tone that most humans used when talking to aliens in fancy places. He did not seem afraid or impressed by the restaurant's expensive decorations. Vera sighed and checked her computer screen. "We have one small table near the kitchen that was just canceled. But I must warn you, the minimum order is 500 credits per person." "That's fine," the man said. Vera looked surprised. Most humans would have turned around and left at that price. She led him to a small round table tucked in a corner near the swinging doors to the kitchen. It was the worst table in the restaurant, where they usually seated people they did not want to be seen. Jake finished serving the Mortians and watched as the man sat down and looked around the restaurant. He did not seem bothered by the noise. from the kitchen or the fact that his table was half hidden behind some decorative plants. He picked up the menu and began reading it carefully. Kekstar appeared next to Jake, his yellow eyes narrowing. "Table 23 is your responsibility," he said. "And remember, human customers pay the same prices but expect them to tip poorly. Do not waste too much time on him." Jake nodded and walked over to the corner table. As he got closer, he could see the man more clearly. He looked to be in his 40s, with dark eyes that seemed to notice everything around him. There was something familiar about his face, but Jake could not place where he might have seen him before. "Good evening," Jake said, pulling out his order pad. "Welcome to Stellar Heights. Can I start you with something to drink?" The man looked up and smiled. It was a genuine smile, not the fake politeness that most customers showed. "Thank you. Could I have some water and maybe see your wine list?" Jake brought the water and wine list, then stood waiting while the man read through the options. At the next table, a group of Vorthans were laughing loudly about some joke. One of them looked over at the quiet human and made a comment in their own language that made the others laugh harder. "The wine selection is quite impressive," the man said, either not noticing or not caring about the Vorthans. "Could you tell me about the house red?" Jake began explaining the wine, but he was distracted by the long day and the constant stream of demanding customers. His explanation was short and not very helpful. "And for food?" Jake asked, wanting to move on to his other tables. The man studied the menu again. "Everything looks wonderful. I'm curious about the Andromedan salmon. Is it possible to have it prepared without the Zelkrin spice blend? I have a sensitive stomach." Jake felt his patience starting to wear thin. The kitchen was already busy, and special requests always caused problems. The chef, a temperamental Mortian named Grax, hated when servers asked for changes to his recipes. "The menu items are prepared as listed," Jake said in a flat voice. "The chef doesn't usually make modifications." "I understand it might be inconvenience," the man said politely. "Could you just ask? If it's not possible, I can choose something else." Something about the request irritated Jake more than it should have. Maybe it was the long shift, or the way the Vorthans at the next table kept looking over and snickering, or the fact that this human seemed so calm while Jake felt like he was barely holding himself together. "Look," Jake said, his voice getting sharper, "this isn't some diner where you can have everything your way. This is Stellar Heights. We serve the most important people in the galaxy here. The food is prepared by master chefs who know what they're doing." The man blinked, clearly surprised by Jake's tone, but he remained calm. "Of course, I didn't mean to suggest otherwise. I'll just have the salmon as it comes." But Jake was not finished. The stress of 8 months of insults and put-downs was bubbling up inside him, and for once he had a target he could safely take it out on. Another human who could not complain to management or get him fired. "You know what your problem is?" Jake continued, his voice getting louder. "You come in here acting like you belong, but you don't. Look around you. See all these aliens in there. Expensive clothes, conducting real business, making real money. They belong here. You're just another nobody human trying to play pretend with whatever credits you managed to scrape together." The restaurant was getting quieter as other customers began to notice the scene. The Vorthans at the next table were openly staring now, clearly entertained by the drama. "You want my advice?" Jake went on, feeling a rush of power as he saw the man's surprised expression. "Stick to the food courts on the lower decks where your kind belongs. This place is for people who matter, not for humans who want to pretend. There's something they're not." The man sat very still during Jake's outburst. His face showed no anger, just a kind of sad understanding that somehow made Jake feel worse instead of better. When Jake finally stopped talking, the silence stretched uncomfortably long. Several alien customers were chuckling now, enjoying the spectacle of one human putting another in his place. A wealthy Zulkran at a nearby table raised his glass in. "A mock toast. Well said, waiter," the Zulkran called out. Someone needed to remind him of his station. The man at table 23 looked around at the watching faces, then back at Jake. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a few credit chips, and placed them on the table. "I apologize for taking up your time," he said quietly. He stood up slowly, straightened his simple shirt, and walked toward the exit without another word. Jake watched him go, expecting to feel satisfied or vindicated. Instead, he felt hollow and strange, like he had just made a terrible mistake without understanding what it was. The man's calm dignity in the face of such public humiliation had been unsettling. "Excellent work." Kekstar appeared beside him, approval clear in his voice. That human needed to understand his place. The customers enjoyed seeing someone maintain proper standards. Jake nodded and began clearing the table, but something felt wrong. As he picked up the credit chips the man had left, he noticed they were worth more than most customers tipped for an entire meal. For water and a few minutes of his time, the mysterious human had left enough to cover Jake's rent for a week. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of service and cleanup, but Jake could not shake the image of the man's face. There had been no anger there, no hurt pride or embarrassment. Just a quiet sadness that suggested he had seen this kind of behavior before and understood it better than Jake did himself. Jake arrived at work the next morning, expecting another normal day of serving alien customers and keeping his mouth shut. But as soon as he walked through the employee entrance, he knew something was different. There were people in expensive suits standing near the manager's office, and they were all human. He had never seen so many well-dressed humans in Stellar Heights at one time. Usually, humans only came here as customers once in a while, and they always looked nervous and out of place. These people looked like they belonged in boardrooms and corporate offices. They carried briefcases and tablets, and they spoke in quiet, serious voices. Jake changed into his uniform and tried to listen to their conversations as he walked past, but they stopped talking whenever he got close. One of them, a woman with short gray hair and a sharp business suit, looked at him with interest for a moment before turning back to her companions. In the break room, Jake found the other servers buzzing with rumors and questions. Maria Santos, who had worked at the restaurant longer than anyone, was shaking her head in confusion. "I have never seen anything like this," she said. "All morning, these human business people have been going in and out of meetings with the management." And Kekstar looked scared. Jake found that hard to believe. Kekstar never looked scared of anything, especially not humans. "What do you think is happening?" "Nobody knows," said Carlos Rivera, another server. "But I heard one of those business people mention something about ownership documents and legal reviews. Maybe the restaurant is being sold." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. If Stellar Heights was being sold, all the human employees might lose their jobs. The new owners might want to bring in their own staff, or they might decide that humans were not worth keeping around. When Jake started his shift, he noticed that Kekstar was indeed acting strangely. The usually confident Vorthan supervisor kept checking his communication device and looking toward the management offices. His yellow eyes darted around nervously, and he snapped at the servers more than usual. "Move faster," Kekstar hissed at Jake when he was setting up his section. "We have important guests today, and everything must be perfect." "What kind of important guests?" Jake asked. Kekstar's eyes narrowed. "The kind that can end your career with one word. Now stop asking questions and do your job." Around lunchtime, Jake was wiping down tables when he noticed a human woman sitting alone at the bar. She was different from the business people who had been coming and going all morning. She wore casual clothes and had the look of someone who asked a lot of questions for a living. When she caught Jake's eye, she smiled and waved him over. "Excuse me," she said in a friendly voice. "I'm Lisa Park, and I write for the Galactic Business Review." Could I buy you a cup of coffee and ask you a few questions? Jake looked around nervously. Talking to reporters was definitely not allowed, and Kekstar was already suspicious of everyone today. I don't think I should. I'm working. It would just take a few minutes, Lisa said. And I think you might be interested in what I have to say about this place. Something in her tone made Jake pause. What do you mean? Lisa leaned closer and lowered her voice. I've been investigating Stellar Heights for months. There are some very interesting things about who really owns this restaurant. Jake felt his heart speed up. The Vorthen Consortium owns it. Everyone knows that. Lisa shook her head. That's what everyone is supposed to think. But I've been digging through corporate records and financial documents. The real ownership is much more complicated than it appears. Before Jake could ask more questions, Kekstar appeared behind him like a shadow. What are you doing? The Vorthen demanded. Get back to your tables immediately. Lisa smiled politely at Kekstar. I was just complimenting your server on the excellent service. This is a wonderful establishment. Kekstar looked suspicious but could not argue with the compliment. He grabbed Jake's arm and pulled him away from the bar. Stay away from her, he whispered harshly. Reporters are trouble, especially human reporters who ask too many questions. But Jake's curiosity was already awakened. During his break, he found Lisa waiting for him outside the employee entrance. She had 2 cups of coffee and a determined expression. I know you're taking a risk talking to me, she said, handing him a coffee. But I think you deserve to know the truth about where you work. Jake looked around to make sure no one was watching, then sat down on a bench beside her. What truth? Lisa pulled out a tablet and showed him a series of financial documents. According to the official records, the Vorthen Consortium owns Stellar Heights and 12 other luxury establishments throughout this sector. But when you dig deeper into the ownership structure, things get interesting. She swiped through several screens of legal papers and corporate filings. The Vorthen Consortium is owned by a company called Andromeda Holdings. Andromeda Holdings is owned by another company called Galactic Investments. And Galactic Investments is owned by a private trust based on Earth. Jake stared at the documents, trying to understand what she was showing him. What does that mean? It means, Lisa said slowly, that someone on Earth actually owns all of these businesses. The Vorthen Consortium is just a front company. The real owner has been hiding behind layers of alien corporations to keep their identity secret. Jake felt dizzy. That's impossible. No human has that kind of money. And even if they did, the galactic business community would never accept a human owner of something like Stellar Heights. Exactly, Lisa said. Which is why they've been operating in secret. But I think someone is about to reveal themselves. All those business people you've been seeing today, they're not here to buy the restaurant. They're here because the real owner is finally ready to step out of the shadows. Jake thought about the mysterious human from the night before, the one he had insulted and humiliated in front of the entire dining room. Why are you telling me this? Lisa closed her tablet and looked at him seriously. Because I think big changes are coming to the station, and humans like you and me need to be ready for them. The balance of power in this sector might be about to shift in ways that nobody expects. A message chimed on Jake's communication device. It was from Kekstar, ordering all staff to report for an emergency meeting in 1 hour. Lisa saw him reading the message and smiled grimly. I think it's starting, she said. Whatever happens in that meeting, remember what I told you. Things are not always what they seem. Jake went back inside feeling confused and worried. The idea that a human could secretly own Stellar Heights seemed crazy, but the business people and Kekstar's nervous behavior suggested that something major was happening. As he served lunch to a table of Mortian traders, he found himself looking at them differently. If Lisa was right, these aliens who treated him like a servant might actually be eating in a restaurant owned by a human. The thought should have made him happy, but instead, it made him more anxious. If the ownership was really changing, what would happen to all the human employees? And what would happen to him if his behavior from the night before had somehow reached the ears of the mysterious real owner? The afternoon dragged on slowly as Jake waited for the staff meeting. Every time he saw one of the business people, he wondered if they knew about his outburst. Every time Kekstar looked in his direction, he felt like his supervisor was planning something unpleasant. When the meeting time finally arrived, Jake joined the other servers and kitchen staff in the restaurant's main dining room. The tables had been pushed aside to make space for everyone to gather. Kekstar stood at the front of the group, looking more nervous than Jake had ever seen him. Behind the Vorthan supervisor, several of the human business people sat in chairs, watching the staff with serious expressions. "There will be some changes," Kekstar began, his voice tight with stress. "The ownership of this establishment is transitioning. You will all need to be prepared for new policies and new management structures." Jake felt his stomach drop. He looked around at his fellow workers and saw the same fear in their faces. Change was coming to Stellar Heights, and none of them knew if they would survive it. Jake stood with the other staff members in the main dining room, waiting for someone to explain what was happening. The usual noise of the restaurant was gone. No customers, no clinking dishes, no alien voices discussing business deals. Just the quiet sound of worried people breathing and shifting their feet. Kekstar looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the galaxy. His green skin had turned a sickly pale color, and his hands shook slightly as he held his communication device. The human business people behind him watched everything with calm, professional expressions. "As I was saying," Kekstar continued, his voice cracking slightly, "there will be changes to how this establishment operates. The previous management structure has been discontinued." Maria Santos raised her hand. "What does that mean for our jobs?" Before Kekstar could answer, the main entrance doors opened. Jake turned to look and felt his blood turn to ice. The quiet human from the night before walked into the restaurant, followed by more people in business suits. The man looked exactly the same, wearing simple dark clothes and moving with that same calm confidence. Jake's mind raced. What was he doing here? Had he complained to management about Jake's behavior? Was he here to get Jake fired? But something was wrong with this picture. The business people were treating the man with obvious respect, stepping aside to let him pass and waiting for his direction. Kekstar's yellow eyes went wide when he saw the man, and the Vorthan supervisor actually took a step backward. The man walked to the front of the room and turned to face the gathered staff. His dark eyes moved across the group, pausing briefly on Jake before continuing. Jake felt like he might throw up. "Good afternoon, everyone," the man said in the same quiet voice Jake remembered from the night before. "My name is Keanu Brennan, and I think it's time we all met properly." One of the business people, a woman with gray hair, stepped forward with a folder in her hands. "Mr. Brennan is the owner of Stellar Heights," she announced clearly. "He is also the majority shareholder in New Geneva Station and the primary investor in 47 other establishments throughout this sector." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. The man he had insulted and humiliated, the human he had told to go back to the food courts where he belonged, owned the restaurant, owned the entire station. Jake felt dizzy and had to grab the back of a chair to keep from falling down. Around him, the other staff members were making sounds of shock and confusion. Carlos was staring with his mouth open. Maria had gone completely pale. Even the kitchen staff, who usually acted tough and unconcerned about management drama, looked stunned. Kex single quotes Tar was the only one who did not seem surprised. He looked terrified, but not surprised. "Sir," the Vorthan said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I was not aware that you would be conducting a personal inspection yesterday." Keanu looked at Kekstar with the same calm expression he had worn when Jake was yelling at him. That was the point, wasn't it? To see how things really operate when you think no one important is watching. The woman with gray hair opened her folder and began reading from it. Mr. Kekstar, you are terminated from your position effective immediately. Security will escort you from the premises. The charges against you include financial misconduct, discrimination against human employees, and violation of the equal treatment policies clearly stated in your employment contract. Two security guards appeared as if from nowhere and moved toward Kekstar. The Vorthan looked around desperately, but there was nowhere to go and no one to help him. As the guards led him away, he kept looking back at Keanu with fear in his yellow eyes. Mr. Grax, the woman continued, referring to the Mortian head chef, you are also terminated for the same violations. Your replacement will be announced shortly. Jake watched in amazement as more supervisors and managers were called out and escorted away. These were people who had seemed untouchable just hours before. Aliens who had treated human employees like dirt and acted like they owned the place. Now they were being removed like common criminals. When the terminations were finished, Keanu stepped forward again. I want to be very clear about something, he said. I do not care what species you are, what planet you come from, or what you look like. I care about how you treat others and how well you do your job. He paused and looked around the room. This restaurant has been operating under policies that I never approved and would never tolerate. Discrimination based on species, unfair treatment of employees, and abuse of customers ends today. Jake felt like he was in a dream. This could not be real. Humans did not own places like Stellar Heights. Humans did not have enough money to buy entire space stations. But here was proof standing right in front of him. I know many of you have questions, Keanu continued. You're wondering how a human could own all of this, why I kept it secret, and what it means for your futures here. He walked closer to the group of staff members. The answer is simple. For the past 10 years, I have been building a network of businesses throughout this sector. I used alien front companies because I knew that revealing human ownership would create problems with customers and suppliers who still see our species as inferior. Jake thought about all the times he had served alien customers who made jokes about humans being good only for manual labor. They had been eating in a human-owned restaurant the entire time, served by human staff, and never knew it. But hiding is no longer necessary, Keanu said. Humanity has proven itself in business, in science, and in every other field that matters. It's time to stop pretending we don't belong at the top levels of galactic society. One of the servers, a young woman named Beth, raised her hand nervously. What happens to us now? Keanu smiled, and it was the same genuine smile Jake remembered from the night before. You get to keep your jobs with better pay, better treatment, and opportunities. For advancement based on merit rather than species. This restaurant will continue to serve the finest food in the sector, but it will do so with dignity and respect for everyone who works here. Jake felt a mixture of relief and terror. He still had a job, but he had personally insulted the owner. There was no way Keanu did not remember him. As if reading his thoughts, Keanu's eyes found Jake in the crowd. I also want to address something that happened yesterday evening. One of the staff members here gave me a very clear demonstration of how poisonous the atmosphere in this place had become. Jake's heart stopped beating. This was it. He was going to be fired in front of everyone, probably arrested, maybe banned from the station entirely. That staff member showed me exactly why changes were necessary, Keanu continued, still looking directly at Jake. The treatment I received was unacceptable, but it was also educational. It showed me that even our own human employees had been infected by the discrimination and prejudice that was being encouraged by the previous management. Jake wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor and never be seen again. But Keanu was not finished. Change is hard. the owner said, his voice becoming softer. When people are treated badly for long enough, they sometimes pass that treatment onto others. It becomes a cycle that's difficult to break. But cycles can be broken, and people can learn to do better. Jake stared at Keanu in confusion. Was he being forgiven? Was this some kind of trap? Tomorrow, this restaurant reopens under new management, Keanu announced to the entire group. Everyone who wants to stay and work under the new policies is welcome. Anyone who cannot adapt to treating all customers and co-workers with respect will find employment elsewhere. As the meeting ended and people began to file out, Jake found himself frozen in place. He watched Keanu talking quietly with the business people, signing papers, and giving instructions. The man who owned everything Jake could see had been insulted and humiliated, and somehow Jake still had a job. But Jake also knew that nothing would ever be the same. The balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted, and he had been standing at the center of it without realizing what was happening. Tomorrow, when the restaurant reopened, it would be as a symbol of something new, something that Jake was not sure he was ready to understand. Jake could not sleep that night. He lay in his small apartment on level 7 of New Geneva Station, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of what had happened. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Keanu Brennan's calm face and heard his own voice shouting insults at the man who owned everything around him. The next morning, Jake arrived at work early. He wanted to understand what the new management would really mean before the restaurant opened. As he walked through the employee entrance, he noticed that everything looked different somehow. The same walls, the same decorations, but the feeling in the air had changed completely. In the break room, he found Lisa Park waiting for him with 2 cups of coffee and a thick folder of papers. She looked tired but excited, like someone who had been working all night on an important story. "I thought you might want to know the whole truth," she said, handing him a coffee. "What happened yesterday was just the beginning." Jake sat down across from her, still feeling confused about everything. "I don't understand any of this. How can one human own so much? Where did the money come from?" Lisa opened her folder and spread out documents on the table. "That's the most interesting part. Keanu Brennan isn't working alone. He's part of a network of humans who have been quietly buying up businesses and properties throughout this sector for the past 15 years. She showed him financial records and corporate documents that made Jake's head spin. "Look at this. On Titan Colony, a human named David Wong owns the 3 largest mining operations. The aliens think they're working for a Vorthan company, but Wong has been the real owner for 8 years. Jake stared at the papers. "How is that possible?" "Simple," Lisa said. "When humans first joined galactic society, everyone thought we were poor and primitive. Other species saw us as cheap labor, nothing more. So these human entrepreneurs used that prejudice against them. They created fake alien companies, hired alien managers as front people, and slowly bought up everything while everyone was looking the other way." She pulled out another document. "On Kepler Station, a human woman named Sandra Liu controls the shipping industry. On Proxima Base, the entire entertainment district is owned by a human man named Robert Kim. The pattern is everywhere once you know what to look for." Jake felt dizzy again. "You're saying that humans secretly control major businesses all over this sector?" "Not just this sector," Lisa said quietly. "I've been in contact with reporters on other stations, other colonies. This is happening everywhere. While aliens have been congratulating themselves on keeping humans in their place, humans have been buying their place instead." The break room door opened and Maria Santos walked in. She looked as confused and overwhelmed as Jake felt. "Are you talking about yesterday?" she asked. "Because I still can't believe it really happened." Lisa gestured for Maria to sit down. "It's bigger than just yesterday. Jake, Maria, you've been working for a human-owned business for months without knowing it. But you've also been working alongside human co-workers who were just as fooled as you were. She showed them a list of names and positions. Remember how the alien managers always seemed to know exactly which human employees to promote and which ones to keep down? They weren't making those decisions. Human supervisors in the background were evaluating all of you, deciding who showed leadership potential and who was just going through the motions. Jake thought about all the times he had wondered why certain people got better shifts or training opportunities. Someone was watching us. Someone was investing in you, Lisa corrected. The humans who run this network don't just buy businesses. They develop human talent. They've been identifying the best and brightest human workers throughout the galaxy and quietly preparing them for leadership roles. Maria leaned forward. What kind of leadership roles? Lisa's expression grew serious. Think about it. If you secretly own dozens of businesses, you need people you can trust to run them. You need humans who understand both sides of the galactic economy, who know what it's like to be underestimated, and who won't make the same mistakes when they're in charge. Before Jake could ask more questions, the door opened again and Keanu Brennan walked in. Jake jumped to his feet, nearly spilling his coffee, but Keanu waved for him to sit back down. "Miss Park," Keanu said with a nod to Lisa. "I should have known you'd be here bright and early." "I hope you're getting the story you wanted," Lisa smiled. "It's even bigger than I thought." "How long have you been planning this reveal?" Keanu sat down at their table, making the small break room feel suddenly important. "We've been preparing for this moment for 5 years. The network is strong enough now that we don't need to hide anymore. And frankly, watching how our own people were being treated made it clear that secrecy was causing more harm than good." He looked directly at Jake. "Yesterday evening showed me that even humans had started to believe the lies about our limitations. That's when I knew it was time to step into the light." Jake felt his face burning with shame. "Sir, I want to apologize." Keanu held up a hand. "No apology necessary. You were reacting to a system that was designed to make you feel powerless." "But that system is ending," Maria spoke up nervously. "What happens now? Do the aliens know about all of this?" "Some do," Keanu said. "The smart ones have been figuring it out for months. But most are still catching up to the new reality. There are emergency meetings happening in corporate boardrooms all over the sector right now. A lot of alien executives are discovering that their biggest competitors, their landlords, and sometimes their own bosses are actually human." Lisa was taking notes rapidly. "How are they reacting?" Keanu's expression grew thoughtful. "Mixed reactions. Some are angry, some are frightened. Some are impressed. A few are even relieved. Turns out that working with humans is often easier than working with their own species." He stood up and walked to the window that showed the station's main docking bay. "Look out there. See those cargo ships? 3 of them are owned by humans. The fueling station, human-owned. The customs office? The director is a human woman named Patricia Chun, though she's been working under an alien supervisor who thought he was in charge." Jake joined him at the window and tried to see the station with new eyes. How much do humans actually control? In this sector, about 60% of major commercial operations across the galaxy. We're still calculating, but it's significant. Keanu turned back to face them. "The point isn't the numbers, though. The point is that humanity earned this position through hard work, smart planning, and taking advantage of other species' prejudices." "But why keep it secret for so long?" Maria asked. "Because we needed time to build strength," Keanu explained. "If we had revealed ourselves too early, before we had enough economic power to defend our positions, we would have been crushed. Other species would have united against us, changed laws to exclude us, or simply refused to do business with human-owned companies." Lisa looked up from her notes. "And now?" Keanu smiled, and for the first time, Jake could see something fierce and determined behind his calm exterior. "Now we're strong enough that they can't ignore us or push us out. We've become too important to the galactic economy. They have to accept us as equals, whether they want to or not." The morning briefing alarm chimed, signaling that it was time for the restaurant to prepare for opening. As they gathered their things, Jake realized that he was about to serve customers who might not yet know that they were eating in a human-owned establishment. "One more question," Jake said as Keanu headed for the door. "What do you want from us?" From the human employees who didn't know any of this was happening. Keanu paused and looked back at him. "I want you to remember that you're not just serving food today. You're representing the new face of humanity in the galaxy. Show them what we're really capable of when we're not trying to hide who we are." As Keanu left, Jake looked at Lisa and Maria. They were all thinking the same thing. Everything they thought they knew about their place in the galaxy had been wrong. And today, they were going to help prove it to everyone else. The first customers began arriving at Stellar Heights an hour after Jake's conversation with Keanu. Word had spread quickly through the station about the changes in ownership, and many beings came out of curiosity rather than hunger. Jake watched from behind the service counter as aliens who had never shown interest in the restaurant before made reservations just to see what a human-owned establishment would look like. The new hostess was a human woman named Rachel Kim who had been working in the station's administrative offices. She greeted each customer with professional courtesy, regardless of their species. Jake noticed that she did not bow or act submissive the way Vera used to do. She treated everyone as equals, and somehow this made the restaurant feel more dignified rather than less. Jake's first table of the day was a group of Vorthan businessmen who had eaten at Stellar Heights many times before. They sat down cautiously, looking around as if they expected the furniture to be different. Their leader, a large Vorthan with silver scales, kept glancing toward the kitchen and the service area. "Good afternoon," Jake said as he approached their table. "Welcome to Stellar Heights. Can I start you with drinks?" The silver-scaled Vorthan studied Jake carefully. "You're the same waiter who was here before, the human who—" He paused, seeming unsure how to finish the sentence. "Yes, sir," Jake said calmly. "I'm still here, and I'm glad to serve you today." The Vorthan looked confused. "But the owner is human now. Don't you think that's unusual?" Jake had been dreading this moment, but now that it was here, he found himself feeling more confident than expected. "I think good food and good service matter more than who signs the paycheck, sir. Would you like to hear about today's specials?" The Vorthans ordered their usual meals, but Jake could tell they were watching everything more carefully than before. They spoke in lower voices and kept looking around as if they were visiting an alien planet instead of the same restaurant they had been coming to for years. At his second table, Jake served a Mortian family who seemed nervous and excited at the same time. The father kept asking questions about how the menu had changed and whether the food would taste different under human management. Jake assured them that the same chefs were preparing the same recipes, just with better working conditions and more respect for the staff. As the lunch rush continued, Jake began to notice patterns in how different customers were reacting to the news. Some aliens seemed genuinely curious about what human ownership would mean. They asked polite questions and treated Jake with more respect than he had ever received before. Others appeared worried or uncomfortable, as if they were not sure whether they still belonged in such an exclusive place. The most interesting reactions came from the human customers. Jake served a human couple who had been nervous and quiet during their previous visits to Stellar Heights. Today, they sat up straighter and spoke in normal voices instead of whispers. When Jake brought their food, the woman smiled at him with genuine warmth. "This feels different," she said quietly. "Better," Jake nodded. "I think it's going to keep getting better." Around mid-afternoon, Jake was clearing a table when he heard raised voices from across the dining room. A group of Zelkrons at table 12 were arguing with Rachel at the hostess station. Their leader, a tall female with silver skin, was gesturing angrily. "This is unacceptable," the Zelkron was saying loudly enough for other customers to hear. "We have been loyal customers for years. We should not have to tolerate being served by species that don't understand proper service standards." Rachel remained calm and professional. "I'm sorry you feel that way, ma'am. Our service standards remain the same high quality you've always experienced here. All of our staff are trained professionals." "That's not the point," the Zelkron snapped. "The natural order of things has been disrupted. Humans should know their place." Jake felt his old anger starting to rise, but before he could react, Keanu appeared beside the hostess station. He had been moving quietly through the restaurant all day, observing how things were going, but now he stepped directly into the confrontation. "Good afternoon," Keanu said to the angry Zelkron. "I'm the owner. Is there a problem I can help resolve?" The Zelkron looked him up and down with obvious disdain. "Yes, there is a problem. This establishment has standards to maintain. Allowing humans to run things will drive away your quality clientele." Keanu nodded thoughtfully. "I understand your concern. Let me ask you something. In all the times you've eaten here before today, have you ever been dissatisfied with your meal or service?" "Well, no, but, and today, has anything about your food or service been different from your previous visits?" The Zelkron hesitated. "The food was fine, but that's not the issue." "I see," Keanu said. "So your complaint is not about the quality of what we provide, but about the species of the people providing it." "Exactly," the Zelkron said, apparently not realizing how her words sounded. Keanu was quiet for a moment, and Jake could see other customers throughout the restaurant listening to the exchange. "Ma'am, I want to be very clear about something. This restaurant welcomes all customers who treat our staff with respect and appreciate quality food and service. We don't discriminate based on species, homeworld, or appearance." He paused and looked directly at the Zelkron. "However, we also don't tolerate customers who treat our employees as inferior based on their biology. If you cannot accept being served by humans with the same courtesy you would show any other professional, then Stellar Heights is no longer the right establishment for you." The Zelkron's three eyes widened in shock. "You're asking me to leave?" "I'm giving you a choice," Keanu said calmly. "You can enjoy your meal and treat all of our staff with respect, or you can find somewhere else to eat where your attitudes are more welcome." Jake held his breath as the Zelkron looked around the restaurant. Several other alien customers were watching, and Jake could see them thinking about their own behavior and attitudes. The Zelkron seemed to realize that she was not going to get support for her position. "This is outrageous," she said, but her voice had lost its confident tone. "We'll see how long this place lasts with policies like this." She and her companions gathered their things and left. As the door closed behind them, Jake noticed that the remaining customers seemed more relaxed rather than more tense. A Mordian businessman at a nearby table actually nodded approvingly at Keanu. Later that evening, as Jake was finishing his shift, Keanu approached him while he was wiping down tables. "How did today feel?" Keanu asked. Jake thought about it carefully. "Different. Better, mostly. Some customers seemed confused, but I think they'll get used to it. And you? How do you feel about representing human capabilities now that you know what's really happening?" Jake paused in his cleaning. "Proud, I think. For the first time since I started working here, I felt like I mattered. Like my work meant something beyond just bringing food to tables." Keanu smiled. "That's exactly what I was hoping to hear. Tomorrow, we're going to start training sessions for all the human staff. Leadership development, business skills, communication training. We're not just running a restaurant anymore. We're proving what humans can accomplish when we're not hiding our abilities." As Jake walked home that night, He thought about how much had changed in just 2 days. The same station corridors, the same shops and apartments, but now he knew that humans had built much of what he was seeing. He passed a group of alien workers discussing the day's events, and he heard one of them say something that made him smile. "Maybe we underestimated them," a Vorthan was saying to his companion. "Maybe humans are more capable than we thought." Jake kept walking, but he stood a little straighter. Tomorrow he would go back to Stellar Heights and continue serving customers from across the galaxy. But now he would do it as a representative of humanity's true potential, not as someone trying to prove he deserved to be there. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted, and Jake Morrison was ready to help show everyone what that really meant. The age of humanity hiding in the shadows was over. Now it was time to step into the light and claim their rightful place among the stars.